I saw that wall of water coming section by section, and believe me, it's scary to see that. You don't want to be caught in that.
I've been through 8 of them, and nothing. It's getting to you.
You've been through 8 floods?
48, 50, a big one, 66, 69, 74, 79, and 96 and 97. Yeah.
But you've never seen anything like this?
No. No, your life savings is going down the river.
In the spring of 1997, Manitobans endured the worst flood this province has seen in nearly 2 centuries. An archetypal struggle ensued between an ancient river seeking to expand its borders and the river people who live alongside it, fighting to protect their lives and property. Since water level measurements were first taken at the forks of the Red and Assiniboine rivers, only the Great Flood of 1826 had higher measured levels than those that would be recorded in 1997. A vast Red Sea covered southern Manitoba from the Canada-US border north to the city of Winnipeg, covering nearly 1,000 square miles. Despite surprisingly accurate flood forecasts from city and provincial officials, nothing could have prepared Manitoba for the awesome power the Red River would unleash on the valley. But the people of Manitoba rose to this unprecedented challenge with a fighting spirit that would leave the rest of Canada shaking their heads in wonder and admiration. With the eyes of the world on them, Manitobans wouldn't just survive the battle with the raging Red River, they would win it. CKND Newsline was there every step of the way to bring you comprehensive coverage of this remarkable story. What follows is a compilation of those events from the spring of 1997, and it is intended to stand as a testament to all those who battled the flood of the century. All net proceeds from the sale of this video will go directly to the Canadian Red Cross Flood Relief Fund.
Tuesday, April 29th, and leaving a billion-dollar path of destruction in its wake, the crest of the raging Red River hits the Canada-US border. Manitobans brace themselves for the flood of the century, and all eyes are on the border town of Emerson as the crest approaches. Protected only by its ring dike, Emerson now stands in the middle of the swollen Red, with only a few emergency personnel left to power the pumps and patrol the dike.
It's eerily quiet in Emerson today, the calm before the storm.
I'm here and Dennis, and we're going out by a truck.
The last residents fled today, one step ahead of the rising Red River. Emerson is now isolated behind its ring dike. It's a wrenching feeling to leave the town after battling so hard to defend it from the onslaught of the Red.
I don't know if my house is going to be there. I don't know if I'll have a job. Leaving my husband here to man the dikes, and
Others are relieved the flood preparations are finally over.
It's just mostly relief. I'm not that worried about the house. If something happens, something happens. I can't do anything about it now anyway.
Premier Gary Filman dropped in for a last-minute check of the flood defenses. He's hopeful the dike will hold, but is under no illusions about what's ahead for southern Manitoba.
In uncharted territory, this is, I think most people say, a 1 in 500 year flood. That's not something that people plan for.
The ring dike in Emerson will be the first in Manitoba tested by the flooding Red. It's been built 1.5 feet higher than the expected crest. A plywood splash guard has been bolted on top. It'll be patrolled by crews of 12 people working in shifts, ferried in by the Army. No one lives in Emerson now. The last evacuees left this afternoon in a military convoy.
It's unfortunate that some people have to go, but their thoughts will be with us because we're here to do what they couldn't do.
Now it's up to the dike. Will it hold back the Red River when it crests here on Sunday? All eyes will be on Emerson to see if it's possible to defeat the flood of the century.
When I saw Grand Forks, that's when it was really scared everybody along here. You know, when you see what can happen.
If any Manitobans doubted they would be in for the battle of their lives in 1997, those doubts were quickly erased by the pictures and stories of utter destruction that took place only days before in Grand Forks, North Dakota. The fight was lost there to the river when the city's dike system succumbed to the rising red, covering 75% of Grand Forks with 3 to 4 feet of water. More than 40,000 people were driven from their homes, and damage estimates were in the billions of dollars. The surreal sight of downtown Grand Forks engulfed in flames as the water covered the streets was a grim warning to Manitoba of the awesome power the surging river was about to unleash on them.
A 5-foot cement dike isn't enough to keep the water back. Main streets and entire neighborhoods are completely shut down. This is Grand Forks, North Dakota's worst flood in a century. Almost 3,000 people have been forced from their homes, and another 50,000 wait for the call. Overhead, helicopters dumping 500 gallons of water at a time are battling the latest disaster. First, Grand Forks was devastated by the worst flood in 500 years. Now, a downtown fire that began yesterday has taken over 4 city blocks. The entire city of 50,000 is being urged to evacuate.
Walk away from those homes, walk away from those buildings. We will rebuild, and we will be stronger, and we will be in it together.
Mandatory evacuations are in place in 75% of the city, but hundreds of residents were reluctant to leave their belongings behind.
We can't fight this one. Everything is gone. It's just gone.
The situation is so severe that police are threatening to arrest those who don't obey the evacuation order.
We're talking about death here. We need to rescue those people. They have to get a hold of us.
Well, if we spend the night in jail...
Dan Hennessy and Ken Sweeney are risking arrest.
Yeah, we canoed right into it. Well, got the front end of the canoe into it anyway.
Well, what did it look like?
Well, the basement is completely full, and what would you say, like 8 or 9 more inches of rise before the main floor goes? Yeah. If we're lucky, maybe a foot.
Water and power have been cut off to all parts of the city. The floodwaters are being used to control the flames. It will be at least 3 weeks before things can return to normal in Grand Forks. The river is close to cresting, but it's expected to stay this high for another 6 days. Grand Forks officials say they had no idea the water would get this high. As the river continues to surge north, people here are warning Manitobans to prepare for the worst.
Tributary systems all along the Red River throughout southern Manitoba were also flooding their banks. With the ground already saturated from high water levels in 1996 and the record snowfall over the winter, meltwater has nowhere to go. Combine these levels with water backing up from the Red River, and the result was predictable. The first destruction in Manitoba takes place April 20th, when Joubert Creek overflows in the town of St. Pierre-Joly.
Last night, St. Pierre-Joly was partially evacuated. The hospital and personal care home were emptied.
We'll see.
100 people had to be taken to safety when Joubert Creek backed up and flooded homes.
Put all the stuff on the cupboards, raised everything in the house, put away all the toys, whatever, save whatever you can.
Today, the creek continues to run dangerously high, proving the red isn't the only menace in the valley. The town is frantically patching and raising its ring dike today. Volunteers are out in force sandbagging. Homeowners are keeping a wary eye on the creek.
There is the potential for the entire valley to be evacuated, and we are working with all the communities in the valley. There are close to 20,000 Manitobans living in the Red River Valley. Any decision to evacuate the valley will be made in close consultation with community officials, who will then implement the evacuation plan.
The flood is the enemy, it seems, and it's as close as I've ever been to a war, really. And it's kind of frightening.
With evacuation plans in place throughout the Red River Valley, Manitobans brace themselves for the flood of the century. The disasters in North Dakota have the people on edge and wary that they too could be facing billion-dollar losses as the water reaches above even the catastrophic levels of 1950.
Bring back memories.
Lori and Betty McGregor remember May 5th, 1950 as if it was yesterday, the day the Red River caught them by surprise.
We were wakened at 6 o'clock in the morning by my husband's father saying, "Look out your window." And we looked out, and there was the torrent of water coming down the street both ways.
She said, "Well, I'll put on my rubbers." I said, "Never mind, it's up to your knees already." And just get going.
Like 100,000 other Winnipeggers, the McGregors were forced to flee their home. Theirs was one of 10,000 houses filled with 3 feet of dirty river water.
It was just utter devastation and very disappointing.
1/8 of the city was underwater. The river just came too quickly. Dikes were breached everywhere. That historic flood made Manitobans determined never to pay such a heavy price again. But it took almost a decade of political bickering before construction began on the massive engineering project called the Red River Floodway. The 47-kilometer earth channel that diverts water east around Winnipeg cost $63 million before it was finished in 1968.
It has always worked. It's done exactly as it's intended to do, and it's doing so right now.
It's called Duff's Ditch after the premier who built it, and the floodway has saved Winnipeg many times in the last 29 years.
It's my guess that Winnipeg would be evacuated, the whole city, were it not for this floodway.
The McGregors, now in their second flood of the century, also have faith in the floodway. But the memory of 1950 and what was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience does not go away.
Did you ever forget that? No, I never forget it. No, it's one of the highlights of our life.
We've had lots of highlights.
Unpleasant one.
As a result of the 1950 flood, Manitoba devised a 3-part defensive strategy to fight floodwaters. The most well-known part of that strategy is the Winnipeg floodway that surrounds the city. Completed in 1968 at a cost of $63 million, the floodway diverts part of the flow from the Red River around Winnipeg, thereby keeping water levels in the city at a manageable height. It begins just outside the southern edge of Winnipeg and rejoins the Red River 25 kilometers north of the city near Selkirk. It can carry up to 59,000 cubic feet of water per second, reducing water levels in the Red by as much as 10 feet in downtown Winnipeg. Just prior to peak levels in 1997, the city was doing some work on the gates that divert the water and shoring up the sides of the floodway to guard against erosion. This caused concern that there were some problems with the floodway that the public wasn't aware of, but flood forecaster Larry Whitney was confident the floodway would do its job.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with the floodway. In fact, this week it's better than it's ever, it's better than it's been since we strengthened that, added those additional bolts. It's stronger than it's ever been. And it's working just fine. And it'll continue to work just fine.
Only from the air is it possible to comprehend the massive scale of watery devastation headed north toward Winnipeg. Just a few kilometers south of the city, Highway 75 disappears into the murky abyss. Further down the submerged road, Morris exists as an isolated island fortress against the rising Red. And by this afternoon, the water stretched as far as the eye could see, even from 700 feet up. Winnipeg's defensive trump card, the floodway, is already in the fight of its 30-year life against that advancing army of water. By the time the crest of the Red reaches Winnipeg on May 5th, 59,000 cubic feet per second of water will flow through the channel. Authorities are confident it will still protect the city from disaster.
I would just like to point out once again, 59,000 within the floodway channel is well within the capacity of the floodway channel.
Authorities went to lengths today to put to rest fears the floodway would be overcome by the massive scale of this year's record-breaking flood. But as flood predictions continually drown in unexpected water levels, city officials concede some numbers might not be trustworthy.
I don't think anyone ever indicated that we didn't have a problem.
I mean, this is substantially more, and it has been over the last couple of weeks on forecasting, than the 19.1 that we saw last year.
City officials say the floodway gates could be opened further, diverting even more water into the channel away from Winnipeg. But that decision would have to be made by the province and hasn't been considered yet.
Part of the reason for the record flood levels of 1950 could be attributed to the Assiniboine River, which carries water to the Red from western Manitoba. But the portage diversion, completed in 1969, was constructed to address this problem. The portage diversion runs from the town of Portage-la-Prairie north to Lake Manitoba, diverting up to 25,000 cubic feet of water per second from the flow of the Assiniboine. The Shellmouth Reservoir also diverts water from the Assiniboine, storing it and releasing it later in the summer, when the flow from the Assiniboine is greatly reduced. The portage diversion and the Shellmouth Reservoir reduce the risk of Winnipeg being hit by floodwaters from the south and the west when the Red and Assiniboine meet downtown at the Forks. Winnipeg has a unique system of measuring the river height. Measurements are taken at the James Avenue pumping station located downtown not far from City Hall. The water height is referred to in feet James for this measurement. In 1950, the Red River reached 30.3 feet James in downtown Winnipeg. Normal summer levels run around 8 to 10 feet at James Avenue. The primary diking system in Winnipeg runs along the shores of the Red River throughout the city. It protects Winnipeg to 26.5 feet James for the most part, and it's the homes and businesses below this level that have to be shored up with sandbags or mud dikes. The 1997 flood would see the city produce almost 6 million sandbags at a rate of 200,000 per day. And with the water still rising, Winnipeggers worked feverishly to raise and strengthen their dikes.
Everybody's looking for the right answers, and they're just hoping that they find the perfect way to do it. It's like a trial.
It looks like a carpet and is used mainly in road construction, but a synthetic fiber called geotextile is now being tested against the swollen Red River.
We've used it before. We've used it out in BC, and we find it's very effective. As long as current isn't really strong and we don't have a problem with the sandbags, it'll work fairly well.
The fiber keeps water in and soil and sand out. Divers tethered to ropes carefully fasten the carpet 8 meters underwater by weighing it down with sandbags.
We're going faster than you can bet.
But homeowners frantic to say what they can are only too happy to have the Army try out new ideas.
Listen, if it works, that's great. Whatever works will be fine with me.
The final step in protecting Winnipeg is the Brunkeld Z Dike. Engineers fear that water from the swollen Red would cut overland west and then north to the LaSalle River Basin. The LaSalle rejoins the Red at a point north of where the floodway begins to protect Winnipeg. Thus, the water could make a so-called end run around the floodway inlet by way of the LaSalle River and re-enter the Red. The floodway would then no longer be able to control the height of the Red River in the city of Winnipeg. The Brunkeld Z Dike was constructed to prevent this from happening. It runs from the floodway approximately 24 kilometers west to Brunkeld, Manitoba. The Brunkeld bunker, as some were calling it, was constructed in record time as Manitoba unleashed a mass of machinery, manpower, and engineering ingenuity to protect the city of Winnipeg.
A lake of floodwater that's spreading across southern Manitoba has created a new threat for Winnipeg. A 24-kilometer dike is under construction northeast of Brunkeld to prevent any more water from spreading to the LaSalle River, flowing into the Red River, and then continuing on into the city.
We've got people working really around the clock for the last 24 hours and for the next 48 to try and contain what might be a bad situation.
The Emergency Management Organization first formally requested the assistance of the Canadian Armed Forces to aid in fighting the flood on April 10th of 1997. The military's role in the battle against the rising water would escalate to unprecedented proportions, with 8,500 military personnel battling the raging water as it crested throughout southern Manitoba. Almost 25,000 Manitobans would be evacuated from their homes in Winnipeg and the Red River Valley. EMO and the Red Cross would handle the evacuees, and already donations were pouring in from across Canada to help the victims through this crisis.
But I'm an optimist, and I figure we're going to still beat it, and we're not going to give up.
So you're just kind of hoping for the best right now?
Hoping for the best. I've had a lot of good help here, a lot of good workers stuck by me, so.
Most towns in southern Manitoba along the Red River system are surrounded by permanent ring dikes. But these structures were about to be put to the ultimate test. With the towns now evacuated, only essential service staff were left to patrol the dikes and power the pumps.
The water has already begun claiming victims at the edges of St. Agath. Small groups of volunteers remain in the town, frantically building last-minute defenses against the rising Red River. It's typical of the fighting spirit in all of the towns along the Red, even as disaster looms and authorities supervise a mass evacuation.
We intend to stay. There's probably about 20 of us wishing to stay.
Somebody's got to stay behind. You know, there's pumps to be manned. We've got to watch everything here.
Everybody around here's got a lot of money invested in this town and houses and whatever else, and nobody likes to lose the community.
Time has basically run out now for towns in the Red River Valley like St. Agath. Where we're floating in this Zodiac right now is supposed to be a park, but as you can see, I can't even reach the ground with the paddle, and there's a lot more water yet to come. So worst case scenario, show me where the water could come up to.
You're standing on it.
The province conceded today water levels will likely reach its worst case scenario, and the crest expected next week could be half a foot higher if the rains come on Monday as forecast. But the small army of holdouts and added muscle like these forest firefighters remain in St. Agath to keep shoring up the sandbag dikes, even as the town is encircled by a relentless river and more local roads wash out.
Try to do the best and try to keep it out. You know, can you do?
Tons of clay are being used to shore up Rosenort's ring dike. Like all communities in the Red River Valley, several feet have to be added on top of the primary dike to cope with the expected flood. Here it's the Morris River, a tributary of the Red, that's overflowing its banks. It's filling up with meltwater, and the Red River is backing it up where it joins at Morris. The danger with water rising so fast is that it'll trap people behind washed-out roads. A voluntary evacuation has been called in Rosenort.
We're going to get children out and seniors and anybody who is not working with manning dikes and pumps and or sandbagging. So we want those people out.
In a scene that's being repeated all down the valley, this family is packing up and heading for higher ground.
We're just packing up and getting out. The rumor is the evacuation's for 8 o'clock tonight, so we've got to get going. We have an apartment all set up already, so.
First, they have to dig out from under huge snowdrifts deposited by the last blizzard before they can even start building their dike. Sandbagging is moving into high gear. As in everywhere, high school students are proving to be a godsend.
It feels good. It's hard, but it feels good.
Busloads have descended on Rosenort for frantic last-minute sandbagging. They're racing against the rising Morris River and possible mandatory evacuation.
The guy's speechless, you know. What can you say, right? Just wait to see how bad it will be.
Emerson is the volatile spot now, and Manitobans are watching to see what happens there. A Hutterite colony in the area has ignored the evacuation order. 70 people stayed on the colony and worked around the clock.
We sort of held the dike up and kept hauling dirt, and we won the battle so far.
North of Winnipeg, where the floodway rejoins the Red River, residents of Selkirk and the rural municipality of St. Andrews also brace themselves for high water.
52,000 cubic feet of water per second is roaring through the floodway. Here at the spillway in Lockport, the floodwater gushes into the Red. The floodway is operating at close to the maximum expected flow of 59,000 cubic feet per second. You can feel the power of the Red River here where the diverted floodwater rejoins the main channel. Good news for the people in Winnipeg, not so good for people downstream in Selkirk and beyond. In Selkirk, they thought they had dodged a bullet when the river broke up quickly without any major ice jams.
I'd never seen it, the ice go out so fast as it has this year, so I thought things wouldn't be so bad. But obviously that may not be the case.
Yeah, we gotta go get more yet.
Downstream from Selkirk, the Meagers are reinforcing their dike. Last spring, they were underwater when a massive ice jam backed up the river into their house near Breezy Point Road north of Selkirk. They thought they were safe this year until the flood forecast went up again. Levels could be 4 feet higher than last year. They're topping up the dike but are moving their furniture out just in case.
Everyone says we're safe, but I don't believe it. Now I look at Grand Forks and look at other places, and I don't think we are safe yet.
Construction on the Brunkhill Z Dike began on April 23rd. More than 300 pieces of construction equipment working around the clock complete the 24-kilometer dike in record time.
Not since the construction of the floodway has Manitoba seen a project of this magnitude. The massive flood defense is called the Z Dike, or Brunkhill Bunker. Over 300 loaders, scrapers, and graders are now working round the clock to build a 40-foot earthen dike to prevent the Red from doing an end run around the floodway and entering the city through the LaSalle River. Normally, it would take 3 months to build a super barricade 40 kilometers wide, but as the floodwaters flow towards Brunkhill from the northeast, it is a race against time. Crews have under 24 hours to build this dike, and the big question on everybody's mind now is, will it hold back the rising Red River?
Yesterday, we hired a consulting engineering firm to help us with this, and we completed the dam break analysis last night, or we'll call it in this case a dike break analysis, but we haven't been able yet to get you firm numbers on what the impacts downstream of that will be.
And if the river's rising waters breach the Brunkhill dike, the perimeter highway will be the city's last line of defense. Work has already begun on a secondary dike that will run southwest along Rue des Trappistes to Waverly and then to the perimeter. It's expected to take 3 days to complete and is the city's final line of defense.
April 28th. The cresting Red River flattens in Saint-Jean-Baptiste, just north of Emerson. The water flows north towards the newly completed Brunkhill Bunker as work continues to strengthen the Z Dike against erosion from water and wind. There is bad news southeast of the city at Grand Point as strong winds increase water levels and waves put pressure on the precarious sandbag dikes. April 29th. Water levels reach 22.1 feet at the James Avenue pumping station in downtown Winnipeg. Disaster strikes in the middle of the night at St. Agathe. Under cover of darkness, the river attacks. Rising water on the opposite side of town from the Red crashes in over the protecting road and railway tracks to flood the town with water.
The end of St. Agathe came suddenly, just after midnight. The waters rushed past the dikes and filled the town, forcing 20 military and 22 civilian defenders to retreat. Between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, the water level raised to the point where the town was abandoned, and there was no way for us to go back in there.
You could hear it coming over the southbound lane of the highway into the Meridian area, and then we could hear it coming over the northbound lane, and it was just like a rolling thunder.
The Red River took the town's defenses by surprise. Just last Friday, volunteers shored up riverside dikes on the east side of town. But the flood snuck around the west side and rushed over a makeshift railway line dike.
The temporary dike they did put around the town, and which was done hastily and with a lot of community effort, and no one expected to have this water come from that end of the west end.
It was heartbreaking news for the 300 residents left to view the destruction of their town on TV.
I saw that wall of water coming section by section, and believe me, it's scary to see that. You don't want to be caught in that.
North of Winnipeg, the rural municipality of St. Andrews declares a state of emergency due to threat of overland flooding. More than 24,000 people have now been evacuated from the Red River Valley. There are now 7,000 military personnel fighting the flood. And for the many exhausted Manitobans battling to protect themselves and their property, the added muscle of the armed forces could not have arrived at a better time.
Waves are tearing away at the ring dike, protecting this farm from the huge, treacherous lake the Red River has become. It's a scene being repeated all through southern Manitoba.
Because I think I can still fight him.
This is the story of the Waldner family's struggle to save their home. There was a moment of panic this morning. Standing on a road within sight of the isolated farm, Sarah Waldner feared the dike had breached.
Yeah, they're out on that farm, yeah. And they said half the dike was gone, so I don't know.
But a neighbor able to drive his tractor through the deep water arrived to say the dike was holding, but help was needed fast.
And now the water is here. So now people are looking at kind of repairing some of the dikes if they're getting wet or, eroding away. And that's where we're headed off right now.
It isn't so much water the Waldners are fighting today, it's the fierce wind which is whipping up waves and eroding their dike. The dike defends the family hog operation. 1,800 pigs will perish if it fails. Frantically, they dump flax bales in front of the dike to cushion the impact of the waves, but more is needed.
The old dike would be okay, but it's the fresh dike that I'm more worried about. It's starting to wash away, but I think I can save it.
Good news, reinforcements arrive. A contingent of troops from 1 Combat Engineers Regiment out of Edmonton come to sandbag. 600 need to be filled.
I feel good about it. We're doing something for the community and stuff. Yeah, I feel real good about it.
The plan is to cover the earth and dike reinforcement with plastic and hold it down with sandbags. Hopefully it'll protect it from erosion.
Oh, a lot better. A lot better, yeah. It was kind of freaky as days going by, the water rising and stuff.
Now all they can do is wait out the crest and hope against hope the Red River doesn't overcome the dike.
April 30th. The Red River rises another foot in Winnipeg, reaching 23.1 feet at the James Avenue pumping station. All 24 kilometers of the Brunkill Dike are now closed off, but work continues to strengthen and shore up this marvel of human ingenuity and energy. The city of Winnipeg is counting on the Brunkill Dike to stop water from entering the LaSalle River system, and all eyes are now on this unorthodox-looking barrier.
It's non-stop digging and grading at the Brunkill Dike. There are cats and front-end loaders as far as the eye can see. It's a race against the river crest. The project is like no other. Reinforcements come from the junkyard and the farmyard.
I've heard a lot of uses for flax, but I hadn't heard of this before.
2-meter-high flax bales next to hundreds of scrap cars line the highway. They've even put limestone as an extra layer. This is the dike that's supposed to protect the people in Winnipeg. As the water spreads across the prairie, it will make an end run around the floodway and come into Winnipeg through the back door. That's why more than 9,000 people are on evacuation alert.
If the Brunkill Dike fails, it will take approximately 40 hours for the higher water to reach the levels and to threaten these areas.
Protecting the people of Winnipeg means Ed Klassen works around the clock. He got a call in the middle of the night to line the highway with flax.
The flax straw, if it gets wet, it's very hard to process. But this is something else. You have to protect the people. People are number one.
Provincial and city officials say the dike is already complete, but the plan is to keep reinforcing and keep building it up until the day the river crests, and no one knows exactly when that will be.
In the city, there is seepage through sandbag dikes along Lord Avenue, Turnbull Drive, Christie, and Parkwood. City crews work to repair the dikes and power the pumps as 100 dike walkers patrol the temporary structures 24 hours a day to ensure these leaks can be patched before the dikes are breached. Water is backing up from the rising Red all along its tributary system. This is creating dangerously high water levels, especially on the east side of the river up to and including Grand Point. There is serious flooding in Niverville along the Seine River, another tributary of the Red, and in areas east of Highway 59.
What was a country road a week ago is now a lake on the prairies. Thankfully, it was calm. People took advantage of the lull to check their homes. Not only do the dikes have to hold, but pumps need to be working to get rid of seepage through the dikes and in basements. They're lucky here. It's dry behind the sandbag wall. It's holding back the flooding Red River.
This one seems to be holding up. We took 2 days to build, and we had lots of school children from Grenthal and Winnipeg and even Heading Lake Jail come out here. And it was a great cooperation of everybody. We got it done, and we're really happy that it's working.
It's a far cry from yesterday when high winds whipped up waves, breached some dikes, and threatened others. The giant lake the Red River has become is quiet today. The pitched battle is settling into a long siege. The only way to check your home by boat. Roland Fitzner hasn't seen his house since being evacuated to Winnipeg on Sunday. He's hoping against hope everything will be okay.
Oh yeah, the winds are high. We still have about 4 or 5 feet.
So far so good. Now to his house.
Yeah, we are safe. The water is barely against the dike.
Fortunately, the pumps are working and the basement is dry. Now to call his wife with the good news.
I came to the house today, Louis, now I'm at the house, and the water is barely against the dike.
He's confident enough to stay now and keep an eye on his pumps.
When you stay in the hotel, watch to the news, you get really frustrated and scared, and I'm really totally relieved right now, because I think now I can save it.
You've heard probably that other people have lost their houses just down the way there.
Yes, this is very sad. It's unreal.
Yeah. It's tough, but everybody seems to be holding together.
We've got to keep positive.
It's over now for me, so the last 3 weeks of work was done for nothing. I stayed every night for the last 3 nights. They kept saying, you got to leave, and I kept staying. Last night they said, you have no choice, and so this was a waste of time.
South of the city, St. Agathe is underwater and stands as the first tragedy for Manitoba's flood of the century. Just outside of the town, farmers continue to fight for their property and their livelihoods.
Canadian soldiers use a Zodiac to cross what were farmers' fields, making rounds of isolated farmhouses around St. Agathe to check on anyone who is still battling the flood.
The Highway Traffic Act doesn't apply here, eh?
The Lemois family is pumping water on what is now an island in the middle of a lake, but their dike held.
You survived.
Oh yeah, it's not over yet. Still got lots of fight in us.
What about all your neighbors?
Oh, they look like they're surviving too. They all diked it. Well, we had this dike built in '79. It's 20 years old now. So we're all right, but all the other neighbors had to build in the last week.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never, never. Even my dad has been here all his life in St. Agathe, never seen this. I never thought I'd see a natural disaster in my lifetime, especially here in Canada.
The citizens of St. Agathe thought they too would stay high and dry.
This is where the Red River came in the back door of St. Agathe, the community that has never flooded. The town thought it would survive the flood of the century.
But something went wrong.
See, they never paid attention too much. They were paying attention to the river. They never paid attention to what's coming from the back door.
Baudry took action himself to blow a dike and save his house. He feels flood diversion in southern Manitoba may have forced water into his community.
They're going to have to look at the future, build a big dike
Because see, they're funneling all the water to the floodway here, and it's causing a problem because at Morris, they're a lot lower than we are, and they put dikes, and the water goes west, then comes around, it's got to go somewhere.
This man says the government will have to help people rebuild.
Flood insurance is a thing of the past, I think, in this area. I think it was for years already. And that's the only place I think we'll be looking to get help out of this.
Water is still running to low ground around St. Agathe, and people worry the worst may not be over. And as hard as it is to believe that these swamped fields will recover, farmers say after the big flood of 1950, they had bumper crops.
There's no doubt bumper crops will be needed to overcome the damage caused by the raging Red River. With 24,000 Manitobans now evacuated from their homes, the federal government announces a $25 million advance to the province for flood relief. The feds will also cover the cost of operation assistance. 8,500 military personnel from the Army, Air Force, and Navy are deployed in Manitoba, making it the largest military effort for the Canadian Armed Forces since the Korean War. With the crest now just a couple of days away, the city of Winnipeg braces itself for the brunt of the raging red. To date, 5 million sandbags have been filled and delivered, with 1.3 million bags being held in reserve. There are 2,000 city employees directly involved in the flood effort, in addition to regular emergency response staff, and Winnipeggers face the approaching crest with guarded optimism.
Portage in Maine, and traffic is light because here in the heart of the city, the rivers are peaking. So people like Charles Bigelow are at home thinking about one thing.
Oh, it's just worrisome. Everybody's worried about it. All that goddamn water out there.
Similar sentiment across town. Marianne Burt's family has lived on Scotia Street since 1960. Her 81-year-old mother was evacuated, and as the crest hits, Marianne checks the house so her mother doesn't have to.
She's worried and she's upset. She's 81 years old and she's pretty upset.
In general, things have been pretty good across Winnipeg today.
I feel comfortable describing it as a holding pattern we're in, but also saying that every antenna that we personally have and otherwise is still way up there. Also that this, again, is not just a one-day event.
And that's the big worry. Even if this is the river's peak, it'll stay at this level at least a week. And that means different stories for different people. Bigelow has a problem with his dike.
And we may have to reinforce the dike to get us through that.
It will be a long couple of weeks. He has a new pump on the way. Meanwhile, Bert will bring good news to her mother.
No, we don't know, but looks like God is smiling on us today, and it's going to be all right.
With river levels now some 18 feet above normal, citizens of Winnipeg not only have to worry about their dikes holding, but now comes the threat of sewage backup in their basements. The search for backup valves reaches across all of North America. They are snapped up as quickly as homeowners can get their hands on them. People who had never heard of a backup valve just 2 weeks ago are frantically searching for the precious 3- and 4-inch discs. And in some cases, they're willing to pay double and even triple the value to get one. The cry for backup valves and sump pumps means business is booming for plumbers. They're working around the clock to answer the call for their services, and in some cases, even coming out of retirement to do so.
3 inches. I hear those things are selling for $75.
They ran out. I was just at the Canadian Tire.
$75 plus tax. So you come over to your neighbor.
Why, yeah, so.
Everybody in Winnipeg, it seems, is coming to Bill. We did too, and we caught him just in time. A quick trip home for a near-retired plumber who's been forced out of retirement because of the flood.
I just had to finish up some, keep the other people happy so they don't get flooded up.
All of these, actually. These were taken care of already.
How many was there?
Well, there's quite a
I
few.
don't know, about 50, 60.
Calls?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In one day?
And we got 2 lines on the machine.
And when I get tired, I just plug it off and I leave. And that's it. I don't care about. And as of tomorrow, I think I'm going to put the machine back on, and we got no supplies, and that's it. You got 2 calls, John, on Trail Avenue. He's got the cap.
So much for a quiet lunch with his wife. 1 minute Bill is at the table.
There's your coffee.
Then he's on the phone.
Somebody called me to install a backup valve for you.
Then Helen's on the phone.
Oh, yeah, we got a list as long as my arm already.
What time did he go to work yesterday?
He left the house at 6:30 to pick up some supplies, which were supposed to be arriving, but never arrived.
And at 6:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
What time did he come home?
He didn't come till 10:30.
After 36 years in the business, his shoulders ache, his back hurts, the old van rattles. But the Gregor Chucks just can't say no to their customers. For a plumber, trying to slow down during a flood is one tough business.
You know, when they get panicky, they grab anything they can. Put anything they can. I'm sure glad I called you. Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Bill says he has never been this busy. He's worked on a lot of floods. Next year, he says he and Helen will absolutely retire. We're not so sure.
Southeast of the city, the situation remains critical, and emotions are rising in direct proportion to the water levels.
I've been through 8 of them, and it's nothing. It's getting to you.
You've been through 8 floods?
48, small one. 50, a big one. 66, 69, 74, 79, and 96 and 97. Yeah.
But you've never seen anything like this?
No. And all your life's earnings is going down the river.
Friday, May 2nd. Water is still rising at Grand Point. With strong south winds in the forecast for Sunday, water levels will rise at least another 6 inches, with wind and waves bringing more water in from the south. Some residents of Grand Point think they are being sacrificed to save the city of Winnipeg. But EMO officials and city engineers say the water is coming overland into Grand Point from the St. Adolphe area and is not a reflection of what is being done with the floodway gates. EMO requests additional assistance from the armed forces to further assist embattled residents of Grand Point.
Pumps are keeping one step ahead of the Red River at Claude Lemoyne's place. This house is an island fortress in a dangerous sea. A frail sandbag wall separates this home from watery catastrophe. The enemy here is seepage. The pressure of the Red River is forcing water through. The defense is a pocket dike to contain the leak so it can be pumped out. But there's another enemy out there, the floodway. It's holding the Red River out of Winnipeg, water that's spilling back into Grand Point. It's a community under siege.
So they're sacrificing Grand Point?
It sounds like it. That's the province. Claude Lemoyne has just found out he can expect 5 more inches of water overnight.
There's no doubt about it that we're in big trouble.
This means he needs 6,000 to 7,000 sandbags to add at least a foot to his dike. He's furious.
We feel like we've been forgotten. There's no doubt about that. They're shitting on us. There's just no other way to say it.
If governments have abandoned them, they're not completely alone. Joe has flown in from Hamilton to help.
Come out and do this for a day, and then see what you think. Put yourself in their shoes. Take things for granted sometimes, I think.
And it's appreciated.
If it wasn't for the volunteers and our friends and family, I don't know where we'd be. Thank goodness we've got them. It's just overwhelming. That's all.
For its part, the province insists the floodway isn't raising water levels any higher than they would be if the floodway wasn't there.
Yes, there's people suffering at Grand Point. Yes, we feel for them. But so far the floodway's operating as on non-emergency conditions.
Claude Lemoyne is going to fight to the bitter end.
I don't want to lose a house. I've been here too long. I can't, at this point, I'm not a quitter. I'll go down with the house.
Claude Lemoyne has about 4 inches of freeboard here at the south end of his dike. Freeboard is a space between the top of the water and the top of the sandbags. With the water rising and a south wind in the forecast, he needs help now or all this will be lost.
The flow rates of the Red River now surpass those of 1950 and 1979. The only greater floods in the last 2 centuries are now those of 1826 and 1852. The river reaches its crest, measured at 24.5 feet at the James Avenue station. The level is exactly what was predicted a week earlier by city engineers and flood forecasters. Dike levels, set at a worst-case scenario at 26.5 feet, appear to be adequate, and except for minor leaks and breaches, dikes are holding. As the Red River reaches its crest, 5.5 million sandbags now line Winnipeg's diking system, but the battle is far from over.
There are a few ways the high water levels can damage the dikes. First, if winds pick up, waves are created. As they slam against the tops of the dikes erode and water passes over. Second, when a clay dike foundation is built up with clay, any narrow passages between the layers of clay can cause a breach. Third, in dikes where culverts are buried underground and capped in times of flood, pressure builds up around the surface of the pipes, and inevitably, water begins to push in under the pipe, eroding soil on top of the dike.
Now may be, in fact, the most dangerous time for the flood protection works in Winnipeg, because the water level came up quickly. It'll stay here, soak up the ground, soak in around the basements of the houses that are being affected, be soaking underneath the roadways, and that water will come in relatively quickly, but it will leave very slowly.
Saturday, May 3rd. The Red River remains at the crest level of 24.5 feet. Some residents of the rural municipality of McDonald are allowed to return home, but in Grand Point, water continues to rise.
Boats are following what used to be the road into Grand Point. Dozens of boats are ferrying sandbags, volunteers, and supplies to homeowners struggling to stay above water. At Claude Lemoyne's house, they're bracing the dike. Supports are being hammered together to give it added strength against the pressure of the floodwaters pressing in on the sandbag wall. Before the night is out, there'll be 4-foot plywood splash guards all around the dike.
We can build a fortress, so we'll go 15, 16 feet high if we have to. We're not worried about it. We have plans for evacuation if anything ever let go.
Not everyone has been so lucky. All Hugh Plant can do now is take a picture of what used to be his mobile home. He had a 12-foot dike built, but the flood came so quickly that he couldn't close it off in time.
8,000 sandbags at bottom here. You know, put down, push close it between here. Huh?
And it wasn't enough? The water came too fast?
Yeah, coming too fast.
There wasn't even enough time to get his possessions out of his home.
It's finished. The whole thing, the furniture inside, two fridge, the freezer, the whole thing stay inside. No time to move out.
But at Claude Lemoyne's, the mood is upbeat. He has help, and as long as he can keep getting sandbags, he's sure he'll make it.
We seem to have some bodies here and some boats, so let's hope we can get this sandbag dike erected high enough to hold off the wind and the water coming next week.
Lemoyne's greatest fear is that authorities will force him to leave his house.
Could you imagine pulling me out of here now? When I finally get to the end where the water is likely going to crest within 2 days, and I finally built my fortress, to pull me out now and throw off the hydro? I mean, the home would be wasted.
People here are taking full advantage of the nice weather today to reinforce their dikes, but it's only the lull before the storm. Wind and rain are in the forecast for tomorrow, and that'll put their defenses to the ultimate test.
North of the city, the river is also rising. In Selkirk, residents are sandbagging for the crest that is expected to hit overnight. Summer homes in the Petersfield area are now threatened by the swollen red, and residents there are edgy.
We have to redo your lawn, we'll have to redo your...
Oh, that's easy to say until the time comes to redo it, then there's no help, so...
I'm sorry, but that's the way...
Well, before you start going through the yard, I want to know about it, so...
Well, you can phone the RCMP.
Tension levels were running high today in Petersfield.
The idea of having a dike built around his home didn't sit well with at least one cottage owner.
What I have against it is they want to come through the yard with the big machines and not have a nice yard. Here's how high it's supposed to go. I don't think so.
Right now, do the right thing to protect everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody's excluded.
That's right.
If the dike has to go through from one property to the other, that's the way to go.
The community's emergency measures office had orders to construct a dike along the Netley Creek. According to the latest figures, water levels rose 3 inches overnight. A state of emergency has been in place in this area since last week. And today, the water levels got to what is considered a serious point.
It's nearly impossible to get everybody to cooperate or think your way, but I think that our concern is all the people, not only two people, if they could only think that way.
Further north, residents of Selkirk remain confident river levels will not overwhelm them.
I'm told, just to give you an indication on how fast this water is moving, it's traveling at twice the rate of Niagara Falls. Despite the threats of a flood here, people are coping quite well. And to give you an example of that, here's a person I talked to today who said he's not going to let the rising waters spoil his mood.
Here we are. Well, let's see how far we can go here.
He moved here 11 years ago because he and his wife wanted a riverfront home. However, Herb Hardy didn't think the river would only be a step off his deck. The swollen Red River has spilled over its banks and flooded Hardy's backyard and garage with close to 1 meter of water.
It's not the nicest feeling, but we knew at the time that we were going to get water. I didn't really expect that we would get this much, to be honest with you.
Hardy continues to check the water level. It rose by 1 inch overnight, and so far he has kept his home dry. Even though his 3 acres of land are underwater, Hardy manages to keep a sense of humor.
This year I don't think I'll have to do any watering, and it might be a couple of months before I start doing any pushing the lawnmower.
The mayor of the town of 10,000 people has been working with other emergency officials to try and prepare his community for the onslaught of water. Bud Oliver is monitoring the levels. He says unless the water increases by 5 feet, people in his town should be spared.
There's really no reason that we know of right at this point between now and when the crest should come here to say that the numbers will not be correct.
While the mayor keeps his eyes on the water, Hardy is already making plans for this weekend.
If anybody would like this weekend to come out and fish, we're more than welcome. We got the deck here, and we can throw the rods out and we can catch fish all day.
We get 20 volunteers of our own, or 30, and then they just drift in out of the neighborhood. People I've never seen before.
Pretty amazing,
Marvelous.
eh?
Yeah, wonderful.
With all the stories the flood of '97 spawned, the most poignant are those of the volunteers. They turn out in record numbers every day to do the dirtiest, most difficult jobs. There are no rewards at the end of the day save the thanks of a grateful homeowner or the warm feeling of accomplishment they feel inside. Without the volunteers, the battle against the flood would long since have been lost. They embody the spirit of all Manitobans, a trait now admired by people around the world, as pictures of these smiling workers grace newscasts across the globe. People everywhere shake their heads in amazement at how these hardy volunteers find the strength and stamina to lead the fight against the rising water. Right now, there is no time to sit and think, but there is still much work to be done. They are a tough and resilient lot, some young, some old. They don't ask why me, they don't complain, and they don't regard themselves as heroes. They simply do the work that must be done.
What we got to be thankful for is all the volunteers. Everybody did their utmost to beat this, and you just can't knock anybody down, and you just can't thank them for enough for it.
Sunday, May 4th. The Red River has now crested throughout the entire Red River Valley. The province's River Forecast Center reports that without the flood control provided by the floodway, the Portage Diversion, and the Shellmouth Reservoir, the 1997 crest level in downtown Winnipeg would have reached 34.5 feet at James Avenue, 10 feet higher than the present crest. This level is now second only to the Great Flood of 1826, which crested at 36.5 feet. In Grand Point, nearly 100 homes are now underwater, leaving provincial officials wondering why water levels rose almost 8 feet above the 1996 peak and adding to the frustration of embattled homeowners.
They're shoring up the ring dike around this Grand Point home. Here they're pointing the finger at the floodway, backing up water into their community. They believe they're paying the price to keep levels down in Winnipeg.
It's an artificial crest. They're telling Winnipeg something that Winnipeg wants to hear.
The province admits raising the floodway gates does have an effect, but downplays the impact.
The most it could possibly be is 6 inches. And there's, water levels there are 7.5 feet above last year.
Here at High Warren's house, they have no patience for explanations. They blame authorities for being caught by surprise by the ferocity of the flood.
Larry Whitney and all of those that are sitting very piously and telling us what's going on should work the inside of a wet dike, inside a circle dike, and find out what it's like to have water almost up their head. And then tell us what problems that we're having here, or what they perceive of the problems. I'm frustrated with it.
Soldiers are pitching in, delivering sandbags to those still clinging to their homes.
As long as my dike holds out, I'm optimistic. Right now the water is probably above my main floor, so if it gets in there, I'm worried.
Others aren't as lucky. Rick Bona has already lost his house.
We're lucky we got our furniture out, nobody got hurt. But in terms of everything else, there's a lot of damage.
He's not sure if he'll be able to rebuild. Claude Lemoyne has built a massive dike around his home. It's 12 feet wide at the base and up to 8 feet high in some places.
Yeah, it's coming there.
Friends and volunteers are keeping one step ahead of the river.
We've done as much as we possibly can. Now it's just a matter of waiting out the next 3 or 4 weeks and hoping that the pumps work for the next 3 or 4 weeks while the water starts receding.
They're settling in for a long siege and are determined to beat the flood.
You've got to go down fighting, otherwise throughout your whole life you'll say, God, this is what destroyed my property. How could I have done that? You've got to go down fighting, that's all.
There is some good news today for embattled residents. The river only rose a ½ inch in the last 24 hours and is expected to hold steady. The bad news is the south winds in the forecast this week could blow up to 4 inches of water toward them.
North of the city in Petersfield, roads have become rivers. Water is backing up into Netley Creek and spilling over its banks. Another desperate cry for volunteers goes out, and one more time, the call is answered.
Water levels here are rising fast. A number of houses are underwater already. Provincial officials made a desperate call for volunteers for sandbagging. They wanted 1,000 of them, and they say they got them.
Oh, that was a heavy one.
The urgency is because this is where the water is expected to crest next. In fact, it may have crested in Petersfield already. Everywhere north of Winnipeg is at risk because water flowing upriver into Lake Winnipeg backs into their communities. So far, the damage isn't too bad.
This is approximately 2 to 3 kilometers from the Red River, and it's the water backing up down this particular area is called Netley Creek. It's receiving waters from the west, from the farmland, and the waters from the Red are backing up from the east to the west. So that's what we're having here, is flooding from water coming from 2 directions.
Any idea how many houses are lost?
No, I haven't had any reports on that. We've been busy sandbagging.
In the town of Selkirk, just downstream, residents seem calm and prepared, more or less just watching the water. It shouldn't rise too drastically unless strong winds come up.
As the water falls along the Roseau River in southern Manitoba, residents of Dominion City slowly put their lives back in order and head back home.
The people of Dominion City trickled back into town today, 2 weeks after being driven out by a flood. They are among the first evacuated Manitobans to return home.
Well, we didn't have any water in town, and the dike held up, and we did good.
32 volunteers and soldiers stayed in town during the evacuation to maintain the ring dike holding back the waters. The enemy laying siege to the clay fortress was the Roseau River, a tributary of the Red.
We tried to have the dike monitored on a 24-hour round-the-clock basis, looking for any flaws, leaks. We didn't run into any of that, which is very good.
Dominion City's clay ring dike was raised 3 feet and extended 1.5 miles around the town just this spring. And at the height of the flooding, the water came up to just 2 feet short of the top. People with homes behind the defenses got started right away, moving things back into dry basements.
We are relieved. I imagine the whole town is relieved because, as far as I know, nobody got water in their basements, at least very few.
But at farmhouses and properties outside the dike, owners returned with dampened spirits.
The basement is still flooded. It's going to be some time. It'll be a few weeks. The water's got to go down before we can pump it out.
Got a lot of work ahead of you?
Oh, geez, it's a nightmare.
Dominion City kept up its sense of humor during the flood crisis, but more challenges lie ahead. Most local farmland will remain underwater for weeks, and neighboring towns remain evacuated.
The so-called Brunkild bunker is holding up so far, and engineers have been trying some unorthodox methods to strengthen it against erosion from wind and waves.
It was built in a record-setting 3 days, has kept the high water at bay, and now the Brunkild bunker is facing another test of nature. Strong south winds and 2-foot-high waves are threatening to give the 40-kilometer fortress its biggest test yet.
The wind acts in the water in two ways. It raises the water a bit and then erodes the dike through dissipating its energy.
So the Army and a team of divers from the West Coast are working at a feverish pace now to reinforce the dike. First with heavy-duty plastic. And then 100 feet of snow fence fastened up against its banks with steel stakes.
What it does, we're putting it about 2 feet below the water line and staking it in. And any wave action will hit the plastic rather than the dike, as well as the wind erosion. So it should protect it very well.
It's dangerous work, though, for the divers. Debris and cold temperatures are just some of the risks.
I mean, they're talking about contaminants in the water and whatever else have you. I'm not too sure what's in there, but we always like to be safe. So once we're done here, we'll shower up and get cleaned up for the next shift.
The floodwaters are still 1/2 meter away from the weakest stretch of the dike, but it has touched at points east and west of it. Although there is no concern about the water washing over the dike, there is concerns about continued erosion.
We have approximately another 14 kilometers to do, and we will be doing that around the clock. And we expect to complete doing the dike in approximately 2 days.
At the height of the flood, 8,500 members of Canada's armed forces were in Manitoba, battling the raging Red River. The Army, the Air Force, and the Navy were fighting side by side with civilians to save property and lives. The province first formally requested the assistance of the forces back on April 10th, and the number of soldiers fighting the flood multiplied quickly.
That's good. One at a time, hundreds in an hour, thousands in a day. Sandbags carried by Canadian soldiers are shoring up the dikes. They load up the boats, shove off in the floodwaters, and arrive this time at a ring dike around a home. They look like ants, busily swarming, reinforcing, and when it's as good as they can make it, moving on.
We're working our butts off, trying to do what we can do. And, you know, sometimes the water wins, sometimes we win. That's all we can do.
Just look at how far they've gone to protect this house. That's a very large dike, about a dozen feet deep, warding off the water. But the soldiers haven't saved every house by a long shot, and that's because they simply can't.
Life first, property second. And the way I like to put that is a soldier, a sailor, or an airman who sees someone in trouble, they'll risk their life to save a life, but they won't risk their life to protect property.
Here's the kind of risk they're undergoing. Live electrical wires all over the place. Possible contamination in the water, not to mention hypothermia due to the cold. And after another 600 troops were called in last night, the armed forces have peaked at 8,400 soldiers working the floods in southern Manitoba.
We are now, I guess switching would be the wrong word, but we are now putting an emphasis on supporting that 2nd Brigade, Winnipeg North, without necessarily reducing the support that we've been giving to the south.
The Air Force can do that because there are now over 28 helicopters available daily. Yesterday marked the busiest day ever at Winnipeg International Airport, and no one seems to believe the pace will slow down.
Just because it's hit Winnipeg doesn't mean it's over. There is the Red River still got a long way to go, and once the cresting has happened, that doesn't mean that that the dikes are completely secure all the time.
The armed forces are working as a team, and in times of flood, the Navy, of course, plays a key role. Commander Gagliardi heads up a force of over 100 soldiers from the West Coast and another 300 from the rest of Canada.
My biggest problem is rotating troops because they work 18-hour days, but they don't want to come home. They feel such a sense of purpose in what they're doing.
The Army, Navy, and Air Force each have their own command centers at the airport. Here, units are dispatched to pre-planned dike support, reconnaissance, or to respond to emergencies. Well over half of today's assignments involve simply reacting to the latest trouble spots.
This was a unique chance for Canadian soldiers to help Canadians. A first-hand opportunity for the armed forces to showcase their talents in their own country.
For people that are watching this, I think it's important to realize that these are their soldiers and their sailors and their flyers that are saving their homes. And a lot of these people live here in Winnipeg as well. So, I mean, these are Canadians helping Canadians, and it's not the Army and them. It's us. We're part of the crisis as well. We're helping. It's a close battle that we're staying on top of very, very carefully, and we just keep going till we beat it.
Are you winning?
I think we're winning. People at home that see their houses are obviously going to think differently, but people at home that see their houses being protected by a dike that's holding, and that are seeing soldiers building that dike and seeing sailors bring the sandbags to make that dike, they're going to be happy to see that happen.
You're in pretty good shape after this, huh?
Oh, yeah. We're in the Army. We're always in shape.
You staying ahead of this?
Right now we are. Right now we're ahead.
What don't you want to have happen?
Waves, wind. We don't want any wind.
Is this what you expected to get into?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Fighting floods? No, I would have joined the Navy to expect to see something like this, but I'd not even been a swimmer. But no, it's quite amazing the amount of water that's out here. And when you go out to the houses and you see the dikes around the houses, and it's dry inside the dike and the water lapping at the dike, it's quite amazing.
We're working overnight.
No, we didn't work on the water overnight because of the danger with the electrical wires underwater, etc.
First thing in the morning, though.
First light, yeah.
The sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air has become a familiar sound for Manitoba residents along the overflowing banks of the Red River.
So we're off the flood base. We're going to start a patrol again, starting with Grand Point 1.1 and below.
Every day, 20 Griffin helicopter crews from across Canada are getting a bird's-eye view of the river's destructive force.
I see things that you probably cannot see from the ground, or are not as apparent from the ground.
We'd like to get some pictures of the St. Norbert and St. Mary's area down here.
At least twice a day, 4 Air Force photographers are going on flights and each taking up to 250 pictures along the river to provide accurate and up-to-date information to those developing flood fighting strategies.
They are compared to the maps that they use as well, so they see on the map where they're at and they can visualize. By looking at the picture, they can really see what's happening out there without going out there.
In many cases, roads are impassable, making damage assessments difficult. Sometimes the pictures offer the province their only insight into the magnitude of flood-related problems in certain areas.
For example, is water going over this road or that road? Is there erosion taking place in a particular dike situation?
The chopper crews aren't on the ground to see the sweat being put into building dikes or the tears of people who've lost their homes. But an aerial view of the devastation caused by this flood still brings the harsh realities of the situation up close.
But seeing it from the sky, you definitely see how many people it can affect, and it's pretty disturbing. I think everybody that's affected by this is a tragedy in itself.
For many Manitobans who had never seen the forces work firsthand, the soldiers created a lasting impression. They may not have won every battle along the way, but there's no doubt the armed forces saved Manitobans millions of dollars in potential damages. Perhaps just as important are the feelings of accomplishment they left the province with, and the genuine, heartfelt thanks they received from the people of Manitoba.
It always feels good doing something for our own country instead of somebody else's.
This flood was the first taste some of the soldiers had of a crisis of this magnitude.
We were driving these trucks, actually moving sandbags, and the water was almost 2/3 of the way up these tires, and that's the most water I've ever seen on a road before in my life, and I won't forget that for a long time.
The flood is going to cost the city millions, but Mayor Susan Thompson says the final tab would have been much higher without the military's involvement.
They're very thorough, very efficient, and they've saved us a lot of time and money because they are used to crises and they know what to do and they know what to come in.
Everybody pitched in and got it done. We won, didn't we?
We train ourselves to operate under tense, urgent situations where immediate response and well-thought-out responses have to be applied.
Okay, just slow it down. We were training in Wainwright for Bosnia when the flood came, so we stopped training, moved everybody down here, dealt with the floods. The amount of civvies that were helping us sandbag, I was impressed with that for sure. All the different neighborhoods around, you know, they were already there, obviously, sandbagging, so when we showed up, we were just kind of extra muscle, basically. So, you know, there was like a soldier, civvy, all the way down the line. It was good. Yeah, get the Montana. The people were brilliant, first class. I mean, for all the bad press we were getting lately, this is completely different than what I'm used to.
Monday, May 5th. Water levels fall slightly all the way from Emerson to Selkirk. Another 300,000 sandbags have been used over the last 2 days to plug leaks and shore up the dikes. So far, of the nearly 1,000 homes with temporary dikes inside the city of Winnipeg, only 26 have been flooded. More than 6.5 million sandbags have been used, and 100 city patrol teams are monitoring the dikes 24 hours a day. Still, the wind and waves remain the enemy of the temporary dikes.
Dikes are taking a beating today in Grand Point, the embattled community just south of Winnipeg. 50-kilometer-an-hour north winds blew whitecaps up on the giant lake formed by the flooding Red River. The wind creates a double jeopardy for the fragile sandbag ring dikes protecting the surviving homes. Not only does wave action put added pressure on the dikes, it's also making it hard for owners to come and check their pumps. Dave Turnbull asked for a ride out to his place when he couldn't get his boat into the water.
They're not letting smaller boats on the water,
And that's the thing now, yeah. If you had pumps you had to watch every couple hours, you pretty well have to stay here because you can't get in and out now.
He's lucky his trees are sheltering his house. What was planted as a windbreak is now a breakwater for his dike. One bit of good news is that the north wind has pushed water back down the valley, down about 8 inches. At the Lemoyne place, the wind blew up suddenly in the middle of the night. There were a few hair-raising moments when one of their boats sank.
The wind was gusted, was pushing those boats so fast. We were running on the dikes with them just to get them, and it was pretty scary.
He's been there since last night and will have to stay longer because the water's too choppy to bring in the day shift.
Tomorrow it's going to blow from the south and it's going to come in again. It's going to rise.
Bad news. This means the 8 or so inches the water receded today will be blown back in tomorrow and then some. They'll also be contending with more rough water. The tension is etched in Claude Lemoyne's face. He's been at it for 12 days straight, but remains confident he'll beat the flood.
It's stabilizing, there's no doubt about that. I'm pretty sure that within a couple of weeks I'll be asking you to send me a lawnmower.
The wind is a relentless enemy, making boat travel difficult and pounding dikes. With more in the forecast, surviving today is only one of many tests to come.
Tuesday, May 6th. With the crisis stage over in parts of the province, some armed forces personnel are heading home. The river level rises slightly in the city to 24.3 feet at the James Avenue station. But these slight up and down fluctuations are expected. With water levels receding over most of the province, the next questions to deal with are cleanup, damage assessment, and compensation. Residents of the rural municipality of Richot were some of the hardest hit by the flood, and that has left them angry and frustrated.
We couldn't get bags, we couldn't get sand, we couldn't get help.
There was a natural flow to drain that water out, and you guys wouldn't open it.
Where were you guys in 1979? Why didn't you know the water was going to go over that track?
I mean, this is science, but it's human beings attempting to interpret science, and it can't be accurate enough to tell everybody exactly what level they have to build a dike to. So people have to take their own precautions and some responsibility themselves.
Flood victims, small businesses, farms, or homeowners are eligible for no more than $100,000 in provincial assistance, and they have to pay the first 20%.
And 80% of $100,000 for those that have lost more than that is not going to do it.
The federal government pays 90% of the assistance, and they are willing to consider increasing the money.
We're prepared to respond with our full cost sharing up to 90% formula for any other additional measures that may be considered as necessary to meet the extraordinary, difficult needs that individuals find themselves in or municipalities.
But the province has to agree, and the Premier says no. He won't increase compensation now because he says it could set a precedent in future floods.
For 3 weeks I've been saying this is an exceptional circumstance, but you don't set rules based on exceptional circumstances.
Marchand Road is one of the hardest hit streets in the arm of Richot, one of the most devastated rural municipalities in the province. 30 of 38 houses have been lost to the flooding Red River. Remaining residents patrol by boat, checking dikes and maintaining pumps for their neighbors who have been evacuated. Jim Wilderman has managed to keep his house dry. It's been heart-wrenching watching the dikes fail.
That's the tough part when you're calling somebody and telling them their house is going under. Not too many survivors. Very few are along here.
Lucien Steenson's lost his battle. He couldn't get enough sandbags to shore up his dike when the river started rising. He can't understand how authorities appeared to be taken by surprise.
I put this wall up before the blizzard. I knew there was going to be a flood coming. They were asleep at it.
He's lived on the river for 35 years and defiantly vows to rebuild.
If there's a flood like that next year, the same, this house is not going to flood. I can guarantee you that.
Thursday, May 8th. Water levels are at 22.7 feet James, and 20,000 Manitobans remain evacuated from their homes. 30 millimeters of rain falls on the city overnight, and unfortunately, another prediction from the city flood forecasters comes true. As expected, The overburdened sewer system backs up in some parts of the city, and 45 Fort Garry homes have their basements flooded.
After weeks of worry, it happened. In Fort Garry, a major sewer backup, and it hit a lot of people here by surprise.
Did you think you were prepared?
I thought I was, yes. With the backup valves, yes. I thought I was. With the backup valves and the sump pump, and I thought I was prepared.
But Jusko's basement was badly flooded. Officials with the city say if everything is working right, that is highly unlikely to happen.
If you have a sump pump and a sump pit and a backflow valve, you should virtually be at no risk of sewer backup.
And as the water gathered on the streets, there was no shortage of people enjoying it. Many of them believed it was just river water, and health officials say river water is cleaner than usual these days.
So there really is no great increased health threat from the water from a pollutant and from a bacteriological point of view.
The trouble is, this is probably not just river water. It's come through a sewer and is likely a combination of river water and sewage. And anything that's gotten wet must be disinfected if it can be, and often it can't. Jusko will have to throw all of this out.
It's very, very hard, very sad.
Never in a million years have I thought it was going to come up this high. Never at all.
As water levels continue to recede, damage estimates are beginning to trickle in. Millions of dollars were spent to construct the Brunkill-Z dike alone. The cost of operation assistance, also in the millions, will be covered by the federal government. And assessments of property and infrastructure damage will take months to total. Despite all the damage done and the dollars spent to prevent it, there is a tremendous sense of victory in most of Manitoba. There will be many lingering effects from the flood of '97. EMO, city and provincial officials will be taking a detailed look at Manitoba's flood strategy. They will analyze what worked and what didn't, and prepare changes should water levels reach these heights again in the future. There are many questions yet to be answered, and the flood has put into perspective the power nature still holds over us, despite the technological advances of our society. There were many positive things born from the flood of '97. It brought national and international attention to our province. The national media descended on Manitoba, anchoring their newscasts from the site of the flood, and television crews from as far away as Germany were here to initiate coverage. Under the media microscope, and with the eyes of Canada and the world watching, Manitobans responded with remarkable spirit and tenacity. Those pictures spawned a surge of national unity that politicians only wish they could generate. The people of Quebec, fresh from the disaster along the Saguenay River in '96, shipped almost $1 million worth of new clothing and dry goods to Manitoba to assist flood victims. And through all this adversity, it was the people of Manitoba that emerged victorious, rallying together to fight back the record-high raging Red River while demonstrating the true spirit of Manitoba.